High above the sprawling wilderness, where the sky stretched endlessly and the wind carried the whispers of ancient trees, an eagle glided effortlessly. The golden rays of the sun painted its powerful wings as it surveyed the land below, searching for its next meal. Rivers carved their way through the valleys, and towering evergreens swayed gently in the crisp mountain air. Life thrived in every direction. But amid the beauty of nature, the eagle's sharp eyes caught something unusual, something small, fragile, and utterly alone. Near the base of a fallen tree, nestled against the thick roots, three tiny figures huddled together. At first, they appeared as just another part of the rugged terrain, but as the eagle circled lower, the truth became clear. They were bear cubs. Young, helpless, and crying softly into the wind, their small bodies trembled with fear. Their mother was nowhere to be seen. Orphan bear cubs were not an uncommon sight in these unforgiving lands, but their chances of survival were bleak. Without their mother to guide and protect them, they would struggle to find food, to stay warm, to avoid the dangers that lurked in the shadows of the forest. The wilderness, though breathtaking, was ruthless to those unprepared for its trials. Their fur, damp from the cold morning dew, clung to their tiny frames. Their dark eyes flickered with confusion, desperation, and something even deeper, an aching loneliness. They were too young to understand what had happened, too small to fend for themselves. The world, which had once been a place of comfort beneath their mother's care, had suddenly become vast and terrifying. But then, something unexpected happened. The eagle let out a cry, a sharp, commanding call that echoed across the forest. It was not the cry of a hunter, nor was it a warning. It was something else entirely. And as the sound rippled through the trees, the wilderness itself seemed to stir. A presence awakened, an invisible force set in motion, guiding the events that were about to unfold. What happened next would not only change the lives of these three cubs, but would become one of the most extraordinary tales the wild had ever known. A story of resilience, of fate, and of an incredible bond that would lead to something no one could have imagined, something that would only be fully understood 2 years later. The three bear cubs shivered against the rough bark of the fallen tree, their tiny bodies pressed together for warmth. Their cries had softened to weak whimpers, their energy fading as hunger and exhaustion settled in. The forest around them was alive with distant sounds, rustling leaves, the call of a distant wolf, the murmuring of a nearby stream. But the cubs were utterly alone, or so they thought. From the sky, the eagle circled once more, its piercing gaze fixed on the helpless creatures below. It was not a mother bear, not a creature of fur and warmth, yet something stirred within the great bird. It let out another sharp cry, as if summoning the forest itself. And then, fate intervened, a rustling in the distance, heavy footsteps, slow and deliberate, the snap of twigs under powerful paws. From the shadows of the towering trees, a massive figure emerged. At first, it was barely visible among the thick foliage, but then the golden light of the afternoon sun caught its unmistakable shape, a bear. Not just any bear, but a grizzled, battle-worn giant with fur streaked with silver. Scars lined its muzzle, a testament to years of survival in the harsh wilderness. The old bear stopped, nostrils flaring as it took in the scent of the cubs. Its dark eyes locked onto them, taking in their fragile, trembling forms. And then something extraordinary happened. Instead of turning away, like many lone bears would, the great beast stepped closer. It let out a low, rumbling sound, not a growl of warning, but something gentler. The cubs lifted their heads, their eyes wide with uncertainty. The largest of the three let out a small, pitiful cry. The old bear huffed, exhaling a warm breath into the cold air. Then it did something that no one watching could have expected. It lowered itself beside them, wrapping its massive body around the tiny cubs, shielding them from the chill. At first, the cubs hesitated. They had only ever known their mother's embrace. But desperation won over fear, and slowly, hesitantly, they pressed into the warmth of their unlikely savior. The old bear did not flinch, did not push them away. Instead, it let out another deep sigh and pulled them closer. The eagle, still circling above, let out one final call before soaring away, disappearing into the sky. The rescue had begun. No one knew why the old bear had chosen to step in, nor what had driven it to defy the natural order of things. But from that moment on, a bond was formed, one that would shape the fate of these cubs in ways no one could have foreseen. 2 years later, the world would witness the incredible outcome of this unexpected act of kindness. The days passed slowly in the heart of the wilderness, where survival was the only law. The 3 orphan cubs, once trembling and lost, now followed their unexpected guardian, a massive, battle-scarred grizzly bear, through the dense forests and across rushing streams. Under its watchful eyes, they learned to forage, to recognize danger, to listen to the whispers of the wind and the murmurs of the earth. But fate had yet another surprise in store. One evening, as the sky blushed pink and gold, the old bear led the cubs to the edge of a riverbank. The water, shimmering under the fading light, was still except for the occasional ripple of fish beneath its surface. The cubs, now a little stronger, hesitated at the edge, their instincts pulling them forward, yet cautioning them against the unknown. Then, from the other side of the river, a different shape emerged. It was not a bear. It was smaller, leaner, moving with a quiet, cautious grace. A wolf. The grizzly let out a low, warning growl, stepping protectively in front of the cubs. The wolf, its fur a mix of charcoal and silver, froze mid-step, its amber eyes locking onto the massive bear. For a long moment, neither moved. The cubs huddled close, sensing the tension. Then something unusual happened. The wolf lowered itself slightly, not in fear, but in understanding. It was alone, just as the cubs had once been. There was no pack waiting in the distance, no protective figures lurking behind the trees. It had been watching them, trailing from the shadows, drawn to the strange sight of an old bear raising cubs that were not its own. And now, it stood at the riverbank, unsure, hesitant, yet unwilling to leave. The grizzly rumbled deeply, not quite a growl, but not an invitation either. The wolf, with slow, deliberate movements, took another step forward and lowered its head, ears flat against its skull in a sign of submission. It wasn't challenging the bear. It wasn't looking for a fight. The cubs, sensing no immediate threat, peeked curiously from behind their guardian. One of them, the boldest of the 3, let out a small, playful huff. The wolf's ears perked slightly. Then, as if making a decision, the old bear simply turned away. It did not chase the wolf off, nor did it extend a welcome. Instead, it moved back toward the trees, its massive form disappearing into the twilight, cubs in tow. But the wolf remained. That night, it lingered just beyond their resting place, its presence felt but not forced. It did not intrude, did not challenge, but it also did not leave. Days turned into weeks, and slowly, something changed. The wolf no longer trailed from the shadows. It walked beside them. It played with the cubs, nipping at their heels, rolling in the leaves, teaching them to track scents on the wind. When the old bear rested, the wolf stood watch. When the cubs wandered too far, it herded them back. The grizzly, once wary, no longer saw the wolf as an intruder, but as part of this strange, unconventional family. It never showed affection the way a human might, but its acceptance was clear. The wolf had earned its place. And so, an unexpected bond was formed, not out of necessity, but out of something deeper, something unspoken yet undeniable. The wilderness had written its own story, one of loss, survival, and the most improbable of friendships. 2 years later, this extraordinary family would reveal something even more incredible, something that no one could have foreseen. The seasons changed, painting the wilderness in ever-shifting hues. Lush greens in spring, golden ambers in autumn, and a thick, icy white in the heart of winter. Through it all, the strange, unlikely family moved as one. The old grizzly, the three growing cubs, and the lone wolf that had become their silent protector. What had begun as a cautious alliance had evolved into something deeper, something rare in the wild, a true bond. It was evident in the smallest moments. One morning, as the first light of dawn filtered through the towering trees, the wolf stretched lazily, its tail flicking as it yawned. Nearby, the cubs were already stirring, their once clumsy paws now stronger, their steps more confident. The boldest of the three padded over to the wolf and, without hesitation, pounced on its tail, nipping playfully. The wolf let out an exaggerated growl, not of warning, but of amusement, before rolling onto its back, inviting the game to continue. Soon, all three cubs were climbing over their lupin friend, nipping at his ears, pawing at his thick fur. The wolf tolerated it all, occasionally letting out a playful bark or gently swatting them away with a paw. The old grizzly watched from a distance, its dark eyes half closed, exuding quiet approval. It wasn't just play that strengthened their bond, it was survival. As winter approached, the cubs were still learning the ways of the wild. The grizzly taught them to dig for roots, to find honey, to fish in the icy rivers. But it was the wolf who taught them something just as valuable, the art of the hunt. One afternoon, the pack of four padded through the snow-covered forest, the wolf leading with its nose low to the ground, tracking something unseen. The cubs followed, mimicking its every movement. Then, in a flash, the wolf leapt into a thick bush, emerging with a rabbit between its jaws. Instead of devouring its prize immediately, it trotted back to the cubs and dropped it in front of them, watching as they hesitantly sniffed at their first true taste of prey. The lesson was clear. Survival meant working together. But perhaps the most touching sign of their growing bond was in the quiet moments. The moments that required no words, no actions, just trust. On the coldest nights, when the winds howled through the trees, the grizzly no longer slept alone. The wolf curled up beside it, nestled into its thick fur, and the cubs pressed against both of them, forming a warm, protective pile of fur and breath and life. No creature feared the other. There was no question of dominance or threat. They were simply together. Even the great bear, once an isolated force of nature, seemed to change. In the past, it would have spent its days alone, wandering the mountains with no attachment. But now, when the cubs and the wolf strayed too far, it would rumble deep in its chest, a sound of summoning, of calling them back. And they always returned. As the second spring bloomed, the cubs were no longer tiny, helpless creatures. They were growing into strong young bears, capable and fierce. Yet, even as their independence flourished, their bond with their unlikely brother, the wolf, remained unshaken. They played together in the rivers, splashing water at one another. They ran through the meadows, their paws thundering in unison. And at night, they rested side by side, the wolf's heartbeat steady and sure among them. The grizzly, now older, slower, watched with quiet contentment. It had done something no other bear had done before. It had raised more than just cubs. It had nurtured a family, one that defied the laws of nature, one that had rewritten the rules of the wild. But the most incredible part of their journey had yet to come. 2 years after that fateful day, when the eagle's cry had first rung through the forest, something would happen that would leave even the wildest hearts in awe. Life in the wild was never without its trials. The bond between the old grizzly, the 3 growing cubs, and their wolf companion had deepened over time, but nature remained unpredictable. Survival was a constant battle, and their unusual family faced challenges that tested their strength, trust, and loyalty. The first true test came as the seasons shifted and food grew scarce. A particularly harsh summer brought scorching heat, drying up the once abundant rivers and making it harder to find fish. The cubs, now larger but still learning, struggled to catch anything in the shallow, sluggish waters. Their bellies rumbled with hunger, their usual playfulness dimming with exhaustion. It was the wolf who adapted first. Using its keen nose, it led the group to hidden food sources, small burrows where rodents hid from the heat, berry bushes untouched by other predators. At first, the cubs hesitated. They had never hunted in this way before. But as their guardian bear watched with silent approval, they followed the wolf's lead. Slowly, they learned new survival skills, not just those of bears, but of wolves too. Their bond grew even stronger in the face of danger. One evening, as the golden hues of sunset bathed the treetops, a scent drifted through the air, one that made the old bear stiffen. Another bear, a stranger. The massive intruder emerged from the thickets, its towering form scarred and battle-worn. It was a male, a rogue, and it had caught the scent of the cubs. The old grizzly stepped forward immediately, standing tall, issuing a low, threatening growl. The wolf, usually the quickest to evade danger, did not run. It bared its teeth, fur bristling, standing at the cub's side. For a tense moment, the forest was silent, nothing but the heavy breaths of the two bears filling the air. The intruder took a step forward, testing the old bear's resolve. But then, the wolf acted. It let out a deep, bone-chilling snarl and lunged forward, snapping its jaws just inches from the rogue bear's leg. It was a bold move, unexpected. The grizzly seized the opportunity and roared, a thunderous sound that echoed through the trees. The combination was enough. The rogue hesitated, assessing the unity of this strange pack before deciding the fight wasn't worth it. With one last glance, it turned and lumbered back into the woods. The cubs huddled close to their protector and their wolf brother. They had faced a real threat together, and together they had stood strong. But not all challenges came with teeth and claws. As the second winter approached, the wolf started to wander farther from the group, disappearing for longer stretches at a time. The cubs noticed first, their playful energy dimming each time their brother left. Even the old grizzly seemed to sense the shift. The wolf was part of them, but something inside it longed for more, the call of its own kind, perhaps. And yet, every time the wolf returned, it was greeted with the same warmth. The cubs rushed to nuzzle against it, their soft whimpers filled with relief. The grizzly watched but did not interfere. It had learned long ago that family was not about possession. It was about presence, about choice. Through every hardship, every challenge, they had found a way forward. Not as bears, not as a wolf, but as something more, something greater. They were a family, bound not by blood, but by something even stronger, loyalty, trust, and the kind of love only the wild could understand. The days grew colder as the mountain winds howled through the trees, signaling the approach of another harsh winter. The three young bears, now nearly fully grown, had grown strong under the guidance of their old protector and their wolf companion. Their bond had carried them through every challenge nature had thrown their way. But fate had one final test, one that would shake the very foundation of their family. It happened on an overcast afternoon, the sky heavy with the promise of snow. The grizzly led the group toward a familiar riverbank where they had fished many times before. The wolf, as always, lingered close, his amber eyes scanning the wilderness for threats. But none of them saw what was coming. A sudden, sharp crack split the air. The bears flinched, their ears twitching at the unfamiliar sound. The wolf, however, froze, his entire body rigid with alarm. Another crack followed, echoing through the valley. Then the scent hit them. Humans. The old grizzly turned, pushing the cubs toward the cover of the trees. But it was too late. From the ridge above, two figures emerged, hunters, their rifles raised. For a terrifying moment, the world stood still. The bears had never faced this kind of danger before, but the wolf had. He had known this threat existed, lurking beyond the edges of the forest. And now it was here. Then another shot. The cubs scattered, fear overriding instinct. The grizzly roared, standing to its full height in an attempt to intimidate the intruders. But as the hunters took aim again, the wolf moved. With a burst of speed, he darted toward them, a blur of gray and white against the frozen ground. His growl was fierce, his teeth flashing as he lunged. The hunters, caught off guard, hesitated, just long enough for the old bear to charge forward, its massive weight crashing through the underbrush. Panic set in. One hunter stumbled back, his rifle slipping from his grasp. The other fired wildly, missing his target. The sheer force of the attack sent them scrambling, and within moments they were gone, fleeing back toward the safety of their camp. Silence fell. The grizzly turned, searching for the cubs. They had retreated into the trees, but now crept back, their eyes wide with uncertainty. The wolf stood at the edge of the clearing, panting, his body tense, waiting for danger to return. Then the old bear did something it had never done before. It stepped forward, lowering its massive head, and gently nudged the wolf's side, a silent acknowledgement, a gesture of gratitude. The cubs, sensing the shift, pressed against their wolf brother, their whimpers soft, comforting. The danger had passed, but something had changed. The test was over, and the bond that had formed between them had been forged into something unbreakable. They were no longer just a grizzly, 3 bears, and a wolf. They were a family, and nothing, not even the world of men, could change that now. As the first snowfall of the season blanketed the earth, the unlikely family stood together on a quiet ridge, overlooking the vast wilderness they had called home for the past 2 years. The wind, crisp and cold, ruffled their thick fur, but they did not shiver. They had grown strong, together. The once helpless bear cubs were no longer small or vulnerable. Their bodies had filled out with muscle, their steps steady and sure. They had learned to fish, to forage, to hunt, not just from their grizzly guardian, but from their wolf brother as well. They carried lessons from both worlds, blending instincts in a way that no one had ever seen before. The old grizzly, though slower now, remained their steadfast protector. Though nature had intended for it to walk alone, it had chosen something different, something greater. It had raised not just cubs, but a family, defying the rules of the wild in the name of something deeper than instinct, love. And then there was the wolf. He had grown alongside them, no longer a lone wanderer, but a part of something bigger. He had taught the bears to track, to listen to the whispers of the wind, to trust more than just their own kind. And in return, he had learned something he had never known before, what it meant to belong. As they stood on the ridge, the world stretched endlessly before them, untouched and wild. This was their home, their sanctuary. They had faced hunger, danger, even the encroachment of humans. But through it all, they had remained together. And then, as if sealing their bond once more, the wolf threw his head back and howled. It was not a cry of loneliness. It was not a call for a pack that had never come. It was a song of family, of belonging. The bears stood quietly listening. Then, the old grizzly rumbled deeply in its chest, a sound not of warning, but of understanding. The cubs pressed close, their warmth merging with the cold air, their presence a silent promise. They were not just survivors of the wild. They were proof that love, trust, and family could exist in the most unexpected places. And as the snow continued to fall, covering their footprints, but never their story, one thing was certain. This family, bound by fate and strengthened by love, would remain together for as long as the wilderness would allow.